Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the number one abnormal, paranormal show in this world and the many others. Because, yes, we go very quantum on here, and I'm coming to you, me, Kev, Dave Baker, live from Smart City, Glasgow. Yes, the digital jewel in the UK crown, and that's in the heartland of Scotland. And we go all the way to our Aboriginal friends in Australia, back to the people of Alaska. We go over to the Vikings of Norway and back to Nebraska. And we do that all thanks to Truth Frequency Radio Network and TFRlive.com. You be sure to tell people about where you listen to this show, or if it's not my show, any of the other shows on here, because it truly is one of the last places where you get free speech. No interruptions from any of the show owners. Nobody telling us what we can or cannot say. Many shows conflict entirely. They oppose completely the information that you hear. And that's what free speech is all about. We have to make the most of that. And where you find it, you have to share it out. You have to go on to the more restricted forums such as Twitter, Facebook, and let your contacts know, the people that look at your posts, where you get your information from. And this is one place where I am truly still proud to be. 1,400 plus episodes later, and in my opinion, TFR just keeps getting better and better. And here we are. On the end of one year, the cusp of another, the end of an age, the horizon of another lies just beyond as well. And to share this special time with me today, because every time that we share on air is special. Never forget that. Jimmy Jeans is here today to create a special moment in consciousness. Something that will remain forever, past, present, future. That's what we embark on today, Mr. Jeans. It's going to be quite profound, because we're going to take alternative media to somewhere you don't often hear it. And I can't think of anyone better to join me for this unique Christmassy experience. How you doing, big man?
I am doing fantastic, man. And it's good to be here today because, as you said, we're about to embark on a journey.
A moment in time, James.
Exactly. A moment in time that'll never happen again. This is it. It's organic. It's right here. It's right now. And that's what's so special about every moment. As long as you realize this moment's never going to happen again. You make the most of it, try to be the best you can be, try to do what you can to stay alive, on the good side, As
long as, Jimmy, today you have a unique position, right? Because we're mates. We get on anyway, regardless of shows. We would talk to each other. But today you're like one of my special guests, away from being a mate. Because you know about and you have looked into the character that's going to be central to today's show. And today's show I've entitled A Very Manly Christmas. And there's been a lot of people waking up in recent times. I hate that phrase, waking up. But we'll use it because people know what I'm talking about. People have realised the world might not be the way that they always thought it was. And they've gone online, they've maybe looked around and they've realised, yep, damn, I was right. The world isn't the way I always thought it was. And we get this information that then helps us to construct a new view of how the world, how the system operates. But sometimes people don't get the credit that they deserve. And there are names and people that get forgotten along the way. And a lot of the information that has helped me formulate a more accurate worldview never dare say that I know how the world works, but at least a more, like I say, accurate worldview would be somebody that done their works in the early 1900s. You know, a lot of people have woken up to Alex Jones, Clyde Lewis, Chris and Cherie Geo, dare I say it, maybe even the Kev Baker show. But a lot of the information that we talk about, Jimmy, it's nothing new. And there's nothing new under the sun. Sometimes we maybe don't take enough time to take a look back and give respect to the people that have gone before us. Nano Girl yesterday mentioned Jim Mars. Absolute legend in my opinion, and I'm sure anyone hearing his name right now will think exactly the same thing. But there's other characters out there that have had a profound effect in how we look at life, how we look at the world, changing the perspective of many people from looking at the world one way to shifting their perspective to look at it a different way. And to do that, they've called upon the ancient works. They've looked at texts, they've looked at writings, they've looked at teachings. And sometimes we forget that people that have gone before us that allow us to look at the information that we say wakes us up today. And today we're going to be taking a look at a character that I know that you have looked into. And that's why it makes you uniquely placed, because not only are we sharing this moment in time history as friends, Jimmy, but you also have looked into the works of the character I want to give credit to today, and somebody that's going to make it a very manly Christmas, and somebody that's going to make it a very different show altogether, and that's Manly P. Hall. You know, a lot of the things that people run around with today, and we've got different slants on it and different way of talking about it, Jimmy. Manly P. Hall was somebody who was walking this path a long time before the internet. He was looking backwards into the ancient world to try and figure out what was going on in our world and even extrapolate what would go on into the future. And that's why today the main crux of the show is going to centre around the story of Christmas, only not the story of Christmas that people have heard before. It's going to be the story of Christmas told by Manly P. Hall. So, Jimmy, when you hear that name, and welcome to the show, my good friend, my brother, what does Manly P. Hall mean to you, dude?
Well, he's an important person, one of the most important and influential people of our time. Honestly, he did quite a bit of research into ancient brotherhoods and philosophies and things all over the world. He published some books. The Secret Teachings of the Ages was a book that he published. It was a giant picture book talking about different esoteric information. How I originally got into even looking at Manly P. Hall was that, in the alternative media, there's this sort of like this conveyor belt that you jump on, and in the beginning, you're thinking that every single, if you listen to some of these shows, you would think that every single Mason in the world is,
They're all the bad guys. Ooga booga, Jimmy. 33.
Yeah. Right. So, at one point I was doing something, and I was going down the street, and I noticed this grade school, and it was named Manly P. Hall Grade School. And I'm thinking to myself, would they be naming a grade school after a blood guzzling Satanist? No, I don't think so. So then I started to look into him, and then that's when I was really opened up to what he was actually doing. So you can find, if you go on the internet and type in Manly P. Hall, you can find he had something called the Philosophical Society down in Los Angeles.
We're going to take a look at that today, dude.
Excellent. And so all the things associated with that, he would come in and they would do a lecture. And a lot of those lectures were recorded. So you can take and listen to those lectures. And I've listened to hundreds of hours of his lectures. So
Would you say people like Jordan Maxwell have relied a lot on the information of Manly P. Hall?
Well, yeah, Jordan Maxwell and Manly P. Hall were super good friends.
And that's not to take anything away from Jordan Maxwell at all, just in case people think, but it's a lot of the same stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the same information. I mean, he left Jordan Maxwell, and when he died, he left him a lot of his philosophical notes. So Jordan Maxwell and him were really good friends, and that philosophical society in Los Angeles, it was called something, the eternal seekers of truth, or something like that. So it wasn't an evil thing, but I mean, I guess if you look at anything outside of what you'd consider the norm evil, so everybody automatically, every single thing that's out there, if it's outside of what you would consider in the norm, it's been occulted only because you're not looking at it. Or for example, Blavatsky's work, all these different people, these esoteric writings. You might say Manly P. Hall really sort of encapsulated a lot of information over a period of time.
He kind of condensed it all into his take on it, right?
Yeah, and when you think about being a person and assimilating yourself through this information that you discover and pouring through it and having it go through your brain.
And at a different time, Jimmy, at a different time. Not when you could dial up on a keyboard in front of you, right?
No, imagine him studying by candlelight or something, you know what I mean? Reading these ancient texts. I mean, I'm just saying, the man, after going through that type of a thing, the man that comes out of the other side of being aware of the secrets of the universe, and then applying that knowledge to common everyday questions that are asked by society and civilization. And that's what he did at the Philosophical Society. And so there would pose a question, and then he would answer it based on everything he knows, and bring you through the whole learning process of where it came from, why it's the way it is. He never tells you what to think. He just gives you the information, and I got to say, there's a few people in my life that have I'd have to say that I would really that I have paid a lot of attention to, and Manly P. Hall's in my top 5 of everything that I hold dear, as far as information that I've found as a result of being involved with the research and stuff, and I an amazing discovery just to find him in and of himself. There's a lot of, he's a super good looking guy. He got some of his money early on to do some of his research for some ladies, some society ladies, and they threw him some money, and he started going around the world and started collecting things. A lot of people think he was a Mason, from the beginning, but he wasn't. He didn't become a Mason until about 30 years after he published these books. Let me see. He published The Ways of the Lonely Ones, The Lost Keys of Freemasonry.
He's got a bit of the Johnny Depp look about him, if you ask me, man.
He did. And, he was, like I said, he was really personable, a real personable guy. So most of the lectures that you hear, it's when he's a lot older. And then there's also, believe it or not, there's controversy about the way he went out at the end there. So it's
he's an interesting character, right?
Sure is. And
well, I'll tell you how this all came about today, Jim. Right now, I thought you'd be the perfect fit for today's show. Usually, you're the one that reaches out to me, say, "Kev, I'm free," and things like that. But I thought, no, Jimmy, I'll give him a taste of what I'm going to do today, because I know Jimmy's into this character. So I thought, we'll take a look at Christmas from a different angle, because moving into 2021, that's what we're going to do. We're going to look deeper. We're going to look at things from angles that maybe the alternative media don't look at them before. That's okay. It's not to tell you what to think, it's to challenge you about what you already think you know. And even that challenging, that can be enough to either reinforce what you think you know, or it can be enough to prompt you to think about things in a different way. And this show is all about thinking, okay? And to get you thinking about Christmas in a way that I had never thought about before, came across the story of Christmas according to Manly P. Hall. And I thought, well, hang on a minute. But this is something different. I listen to a lot of alternative media. Listen to a lot of Alex Jones. I listen to a lot of Clyde Lewis. All the big names that you'll recognise. And a lot of these people talk about Manly P. Hall, but I'd never heard of the story of Christmas according to Manly P. Hall. So when I got reading the first couple of bits of this, I thought, well, hang on a minute, this is good stuff. It's only 27 pages long, and maybe we could make a show out of it. And that's why I reached out to Jimmy, because I thought, well, Jimmy knows about the guy. He's into him. It's not going to take the full show to read me 27 pages, and there's going to be plenty of stuff that have already caused me to pause and think, wow. Why? Why wow? Because we've all got a way of looking at Christmas. But what is it really? What is Christmas really? And if we start to look backwards in time and we start to look at the ancient texts, then we start to get a different picture altogether. And it's different pictures, Jimmy, that I think prompt people to think about things in a different way. So I think this here is going to be a very, very manly Christmas show indeed.
For sure. You want to hear an odd fact?
I love odd facts. We all love odd facts, man. We're here, ain't we?
In 1942, Hall spoke to an attendance-setting audience at Carnegie Hall on the secret destiny of America, which later became a book. And in that book, through a series of stories, he alleged a secret order of philosophers had created the idea of America as a country of religious freedom and self-governance. It is said that Ronald Reagan is reported to have adopted ideas and phrasings from the secret destiny of America in 1944 in his speeches and essays and allegorical use of the city upon the hill. So old Ronnie got city upon the hill from old Manly.
See?
There you go.
You see, I tell you, this guy's teachings might have been back in the day, but they have reverberations into everything. And I mean that more than it sounds, folks. Trust me. And this is where we get into it. The Story of Christmas by Manly P. Hall. It's only 27 pages long. Not that long. But there is so much to think about in here. And there's so much that I know is going to make this a very, very special and manly Christmas show on KBS. Let's get into it. To fully appreciate the festival of Christmas, we must come to understand what it has meant to man as a spiritual experience since the beginning of recorded history. We know that this sacred season has been held in deepest veneration by the peoples of many races and nations, and it has descended to us as beautiful heritage of tradition. In these days, when facts seem so important, we are inclined to question the origin of our beliefs, and we would like to know know how and where the Christmas celebrations originated. In what ways it has changed and modified with the passing of time. The sources of the various symbols now associated with the season. And perhaps most of all, why we should perpetuate the old times and customs. Originally, Christmas was not a festival imposed upon man by some special system of belief. It came from his own heart, and he has persevered or preserved it down through the ages because it was strangely and wonderfully meaningful to him. It might be very good for us if we could restore this meaning at a time in our history when we feel that faith in our fellow man is so vital to our personal security. All things in nature grow from their proper seeds and unfold the life within them, nourished and sustained by universal laws. This is likewise true of institutions and practices, and is especially true of Christmas. The celebration began when the seed of faith took root in the soul of mankind. This was truly long ago and far away. With the rise of Christianity, faith blossomed into hope, and in more recent times the flower bore the fruit of charity, because such was its way of lawful growth. Thus we find Christmas analogous with the graces of faith, hope, and charity. It has been wisely said that men cannot live, by bread alone, cannot live by bread alone, but must gain part of their nutrition from beauty, love, and friendship. These gentle sentiments bestow strength, and without them we lack the courage of our most sober convictions. Most of the older nations of the world have claimed the honour of being the first to celebrate Christmas. States that no longer exist, Partaria, just asking, are remembered traditionally for their festivals at this season. It is not likely that we will ever either know the precise location or the exact time of the beginning of this festival, but it is safe to say that it antedates Christianity by thousands of years. It has always had strong religious implications and reference to special rites and rituals peculiar to midwinter are to be found in the sacred books of many faiths and in the earliest works relating to history. For the period of prehistory, we must try to understand the ways of our remote ancestors and the forces operating both internally and externally in the development of culture and civilization. We know that the basics or the basic instincts of human beings change slowly, and that within ourselves the first dreams of mankind are still awaiting fulfillment. In the beginning, our primitive forebears were nomadic. They wandered about, sustaining themselves largely by hunting the wild beasts that roamed the jungles and the plains. Gradually, communities came into existence. Villages and tribes set up relatively prominent abodes, and this led toward the development of agriculture. It became necessary to till the soil and to create codes of conduct and enduring relationships. We should remember that in those days, man was a lonely creature, overwhelmed by the magnitude of his environment. At the same time, however, flip the page. Hang on. I'll get us back there, folks. It's just getting good there as well, Jimmy, right?
Fascinating.
Yes.
No, seriously.
On you go.
Yeah.
On you go.
No, I was gonna say. I mean, I'm I can't wait to continue, sir. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. I've got it zoomed in now, Jimmy boy. I've got it zoomed in.
I mean, you can hear a lot of Manly P. Hall in what I say, because I learned a lot of what I know from studying what Manly P. Hall put forward. I mean, he did the work, man. He went around and collected all this information from around the world, and when you...
That's the thing, Jimmy, right? He put it together,
Yeah. I mean, he shows the parallels like nobody else. His work should be venerated, as some of the greatest work of all time.
You're right, Jim. You're right. Now, we're about to go to the break, ladies and gentlemen. When we come back, we'll be getting deeper into a very manly Christmas. The Story of Christmas by Manly P. Hall. I often make a song and a dance about my love affair with Australia, the Aboriginal information that we bring to the show, and that ancient ancestral stuff that I really do believe that we have to bring forward through the old age into the new age. Manly P. Hall's got a big part of the jigsaw, folks. We'll be back after the break and we'll take that into the new age and then some. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, time travelers, interdimensional creepers, queers, steers, cowboys, weirdos. I don't know who's here, but if you're here, you're in the right place at the right time to hear the #1 abnormal paranormal show on this network and many others, and to help me navigate our way through the madness. Boys, 2020 madness. I've got Jimmy Jeans here today. We're both behatted. We're both looking like we've got our thinking caps on. James, we're going deep woo today, and we're getting into a character that has been quite influential in your awakening, right? Manly P. Hall.
Well, let me just say, when you find Manly P. Hall, and you've already done a bunch of other research in other areas, if you're interested in, antiquity and different civilizations and different brotherhoods and, initiatory practices and this type of thing.
You're talking about deep woo there. That's like all summarized with the term deep woo, Jimmy.
Well, there's no end to the woo, in Manly P. Hall's rucksack. Because believe me, some
Jimmy,
of his
isn't he a bad dude? Aren't the truth community programmed to think that Manly P. Hall is a bad dude because he's got connections to Freemasonry? Isn't that like the given trope that's meant to be the thing?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. But, the bottom line is, like I said, I've listened to many, many, many hours. There's not an evil bone in the man's body. And he did everything he did to promote the betterment of society. He put the information out there that didn't exist. He did everything he could. I mean, you might say he's responsible for some of the biggest advances in, spiritual seeking, and putting information available at people's fingertips that they wouldn't normally have even known about. And then to be, like I said, to be the kind of, he's like the quantum computer before there was a quantum computer. Because you put a question into him after he's like 60 years old, after he's absorbed all this information, and he just lays it out just plain as day. And it doesn't, the information is evergreen. You can go listen to any of his lectures right now and apply it to your life, or to apply what's going on. And when he's talking about different, he doesn't just talk about philosophy, he talks about emotional stuff. He talks about metaphysical, there isn't.
Jimmy, in 2021, I'm intending on taking the audience on a journey. Doing this a few years now, 1,400 episodes, and you got to take what you've learned and bring it forward. Where's it all going? Where we're going on KBS is a deeper level of thinking, a more philosophical way of looking about the bigger things in the world. And from time to time, I'm going to bring on people onto this show that's going to make you look at things in a completely different way. Why? Because that's how you learn. One person I reached out to today, and I hope with every piece and cell of my body we get him on, is a Scottish guy called Alan Watt. Alan Watt is somebody who has a view of the world after a life of research that it's not Manly P. Hall, but it gets you to a deeper level of thinking about everything that's going on out there. And while Jimmy's away doing what he's doing, I think it's time to dive back into not the secret teachings of Manly P. Hall, but the Christmas story. of Manly P. Hall. So, to get back into it, it says, at the same time, however, he was naturally curious and his faculties of observation were developing. Slowly but surely, our remote but thoughtful ancestors became aware of the mystery of universal life. They could not explain, nor could they fully comprehend, but as the poet tells us, they saw God in fire and heard him in the winds. Some strange but invisible energy sustained the infinite diversity of creatures, and there were laws and rules which had to be obeyed. Obedience was the secret of life, disobedience the way of death. Of all wonderful things, the most eminent was the miracle of generation. The seed which seemed lifeless and very small was planted in the earth. The sun shone and the rains came, and from the dark womb of the soil life was released. It is remarkable, and unlettered and unlearned should accept the miracle of the germinating seed as a symbol of life, death, and resurrection. Was it any more remarkable that man should apply this symbolism to himself, not only to his body, but to the soul within it? Did not God sow seed when he created the world? And were not the seeds of God locked within the bodies of all beings, which the divine power had ordained? Did not Jesus use the same symbolism when he declared in the parable of the sower that the seed is the word of God? Observation often leads to practical knowledge. The first agriculturists came gradually to realize that there were proper seeds for planting and harvesting, and there were also seasons during which the great spirit of the earth rested and would not yield its abundance. Thus, without the aid of modern science, man began to observe what we call the phenomena of the year. It is evident from the old records that most of these observations originated in the northern hemisphere, where most early cultures had their beginnings. By degrees, the 4 seasons, winter, spring, summer, and fall, were noted and remembered, because often changes and transformations evidently peculiar to each. At the vernal equinox, it seemed that the sleeping earth awakened and revealed its fertility. This was the proper time for planting, and the soil was turned with crude ploughs. Men rejoiced at the promise of a fortunate yield because there would be food for all. At the summer solstice, the sun reached its meridian. Everywhere living things were industrious and active, and vitality was abundant. Then came the autumnal equinox, and the time for harvesting. There was a full spirit of ripeness in the air and in the earth. It was proper for men to reap where they had sown, and to profit from their wise labours in the previous months. After the crops had been taken in, the winter solstice, which fell about the 22nd of December, don't be triggered, Nacy, was certain to come. Great Nature herself, the loving mother of all living, wrapped her robes about her to rest and sleep. With winter came the cold, ice and snow, and these were associated with death. These days were short and the nights were long. It was therefore time for prayer and supplication. Those who had done evil were encouraged to repent their ways, lest their sins fall upon their tribes. Offerings were given, and men united in a common pleading that the grace of light would be returned to them. There were several long, quiet days, and the joyous celebration of the annual birthday of the sun. The great orb of light had heard their prayers, and had graciously returned his face upon them. The promise of the new year had come, and it was proper not only to be grateful, but to rejoice, to share all happiness, to make good resolutions for the future, and to dream of the bright warm days that lay ahead. This was the ancient way, the way of our long forgotten forefathers, whose simple rites and rituals have lingered on throughout innumerable ages. The mystery of the seasons was closely associated with the revolution of the sun. It is not true that most ancient people were sun worshippers, but they certainly regarded the glorious source of light as one of their earliest and most important religious symbols. First of all, the sun represented light, not only that which illuminated the body, but also the light of the soul, of the mind, and of the spirit. It bestowed man the wonder of the days, and his eyes were gladdened by the beauties made visible to him by the splendour of the solar orb. The sun warmed him, and grew to observe that this kindly light also warmed the earth, causing the seeds to sprout and the plants to grow. In itself, the sun was a blazing mystery, the most glorious thing man could contemplate. He could not understand its astronomical significance, but he lived every day under its benevolent influence. It shone like an eye in the sky, an eye that always watched him and watched over him. It stood as a witness to the principle of universal life and to the God who had placed it in the sky and given authority over the seasons of the world. Nearly 1400 years before the birth of Christ, a kindly and gentle human soul ruled over the double empire of Egypt. This was Akhenaten, a pharaoh mystic who made a wonderful symbol of the sun with each of its rays in a human hand. He called this the Aten, the light of the world, and its meditations he contemplated the goodness of the sun. He was moved to declare that Aten, the glorious disk of the day, gave its light to all nations, all races, and to creatures of every kind. It shone equally upon the just and the unjust with a beautiful patience. It neither judged nor condemned. It simply gave life, gave light and life forever. Akhenaten taught that earthly rulers should be like the sun, and that good men everywhere should share their life and light, for in so doing they honoured the source of their existence. Now, because of the mystery of the sun, Akhenaten did not make war on neighbouring states, nor would he condemn their gods. Equity was bestowed upon all things by the example of the sun. Now, Jimmy, let me just pause there for a moment. What do you make of what you're hearing so far, man?
Well, it's great, and it's interesting too to bring up Akhenaten and the philosophy behind his particular reign, and talking about it being 1400 years before the birth of Christ.
This is a very different Christmas story, right?
Exactamundo, very different. And I got to say, I've never heard this piece before either. So Kev, thanks a lot for bringing it out and bringing it to our attention, because I really like what I'm hearing so far, and I know we're barely just scratching the surface, but man, what a great lead up to a holiday that we all may just take for granted. Maybe it's has different meanings to some people, but maybe the man has a different take on it that we've never heard before, and I can't wait to hear the rest of what's going on.
I'm with you, Jimmy. I'm with you. And to get back into it, and this is The Story of Christmas by Manly P. Hall. It says, every night the sun went to sleep, or as some believed, it went through the gates. And I'll just get back up here. Sorry, folks. I'm thinking it's the underworld or Hades. There we go. The west, or to light, the underworld, yes. And the earth was darkened. Now men feared the dark, and the wild animals that roamed in the blackness of night. They huddled in their caves for mutual protection, and later built fires to restore confidence and protect themselves, not only from the savage beasts, but from ghosts, spectres, and those spirits that wandered the darkness. Human beings could only sleep and pray for the return of light, for when it came, it would restore their spirits and provide the hours necessary of the labours of survival. From the beginning, then, men learned to love light and to fear darkness, and when they prayed for light, they made offerings to the sovereign sun. Even the fires which they built were symbols of solar power, for these fires took away some of the darkness. The Incas of Peru went so far as to kiss the sunbeams as part of a sacred ritual of veneration to the invisible god, who was made known to them first through the wonders of light. In the course of time, men became more learned, for observations led naturally to reflection. Scholars and sages rose among them, and wonderful religious institutions came into being, and these were served by venerable and venerated priesthoods. These creeds and codes, however, originated in the experience of the human race, and they were closely associated with the sun, the seasons, and the seed. By degrees, and by popular consent, sustained by learned contemplations, the ceremonials of the winter solstice came to take precedence over all other sacred rites. The Magi, living in the valley of Euphrates, studied the stars and the motions of the heavens from their tall towers in the desert. They measured the seasons, and they discovered the 3 long dark nights which accompanied the winter solstice. They interpreted this phenomenon as peculiar proof of God's love. They said that heaven had made a pact and promise with the earth, and that the world would soon be green and covered with flowers. So these ancient priests of Persia lit their sacred fires, and all the people rejoiced and did honour to the reborn God of light. In Greece there were great processionals of rejoicing. There were midwinter rituals in Delphi celebrating the rebirth of the beautiful deities of Dionysus, who represented the cradled infant, and we'll scroll up here, born from the sea. In the great sanctuary of the state mysteries of Ulysses, the holy birth was dramatically reenacted in the quiet hour of midnight. At this season also, the lusty Romans celebrated their Saturnalia. That's Saturnalia, just to get that totally correct. A long and important festival which terminated on Christmas Eve. In the old calendar, December 25th was marked with the words Natalis Solis Invicti, the birth of the invincible sun. Probably no special calculation was necessary, for everywhere and always even the ancestors of the Latins had kept the birthday of the solar mystery. Now this was sufficient to make this time and season unique in the spiritual experience of mankind. This festival was always a kindly occasion. Men, either in gratitude or through fear, were motivated to generous and unselfish actions. It was always the worship of the gods, for the Saturnalia was their birthday. But the enlightened pagan had already learned that the God-fearing must also be the humanity-loving. At the winter solstice, families gathered in solemn celebration. Friends long separated were reunited, and enemies were reconciled. The very spirit of thankfulness was in the air, and it was wise and proper to remember the good things that had come and to plan for a happy future. The priests of ancient Britain were called the Druids, or the men of the oak tree. At the winter solstice, these great bearded patriarchs, clad in flowing robes of white, entered their sacred groves to cut the mistletoe. They carried knives of beaten gold, and it was their custom to use the white berries and bright green leaves of this parasitic plant to make wreaths around the crude monolithic stones of their altars. Still on Salisbury Plain stands an ancient ring of huge, rough stones called Stonehenge, as a continuing reminder of this ancient faith. It was in places like this that the early Britons gathered to venerate the return of the sun. The Druids sent runners across the hills with blazing torches, and with these they lit new fires on both altar and hearthstone. Through the land flames blazed from the tops of hills and the depths of valleys. Watching the shadows cast by the sun, the Druid priests found a certain indication of the solar orb was returning. Jimmy, let me bring you back in here, man. We're getting into some Druidic, ancient, Christmassy rising of the sun again type woo.
Well, it's interesting too because right now we have the first time in 800 years that the Star of Bethlehem is going to be where it is, and because there's Saturn and Jupiter are lining up, and the alignment causes this star to appear. And also, so you were bringing up the Saturnalian Brotherhood, so there seems to be some alignment going on with Saturn right now.
The Great Conjunction, Jimmy. The Great Conjunction.
Exactamundo. So I was just looking because there's some, I don't know if you've ever seen some of these processions that happen in Germany around Christmas. Some of the costuming that's going on. I was just trying to dig some of that up for you.
It's a totally different thing. Christmas, Germanic Christmas is a lot removed from traditional Christmas. You can look at Krampus. Big shout out to Clyde Lewis. He's the man that taught me a lot about Krampus. But there's other deities out there, such as one called the Perchta. The Perchta or Birchta, also commonly known as Perched, and also variations, was once known as a goddess in Alpine paganism in the upper German and Austrian religions of the Alps. So along with Krampus, you've got Perchta as well, Jimmy. Yeah, see, I've done my research for today, man.
You sure did, and let me just say, I'm gonna drop you a secret photo right here of the secret doctrine right there of some German Christmases of the past, and you might enjoy that little devilish photo there. Well, there we go. I don't know what happened, but when I went over to drop that, apparently I messed up the video feed.
No,
there.
It's okay. I'm just trying to save it, Jimmy. It's okay.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to save it.
There's another
I can bring it up like this. Hang on, there you go. And now, see, it doesn't bring it up right. I'm going to save it, folks. Don't you worry.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, there we go. We're saving it. I'll bring it up. But, Jimmy, describe for the radio audience what we're looking at here, okay? Go for it. Try.
It's a procession of these characters wearing masks, horn-like masks, They look demonish and devilish in a sense. There's another one that's even more intense than the one I just sent you. I have one. I have one on my other machine that is literally unbelievable. With these, it's got a black figure dressed in the front of the procession, and then there's all these white figures behind him with these same horns. And it's like a procession of almost, you might want to even say, they almost look demonish or demon-like. Here, I'll get you another one. I mean, these are literally, here's one of Krampus itself, just to put it into perspective.
Yeah,
I mean,
Krampus is a thing unto itself, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's a whole lot of weirdness, man. Well, listen, I'm gonna well, we're almost at the break now. But when we come back on the other side, we'll crack on with a bit of this story.
Yes.
The very manly Christmas here on KBS. I might just have to continue this tomorrow because let me look at the pages. I think we're on page 8 of 27. We might get through half of this today, going at this pace, but that's okay. That's cool. Because Scotty, he should be here tomorrow. Maybe Jimmy can jump back on. Very different Christmas show here on KBS, Jimmy.
Well, I'm going to fill up my coffee cup on the break, and I'm going to get ready to sit down and hear you let it happen right here, right now.
I was having a little gentleman jack earlier on, little scotch, but now it's coffee. We're in the deep woo. We are panning for deep woo here on KBS. It's a very manly Christmas in a toxic and woo kind of way. Join us after the break. Don't go anywhere. You savages. Going down, the New World Order. Take a look outside, folks. It is building itself all around us, but that's okay, because we are coming to you from deep within enemy lines. Yes, we are. And we're taking you to some of the information that they really, really fear. There's information of varying levels out there. Some they don't mind us looking at. Some they love us looking at. Some they're quite happy for us to argue over. But you know the one thing that they really don't like us doing? It's looking backwards. Because looking backwards can sometimes interpret what we're going through right now. And it gives us a leg up to where we're going. And that's what we're doing here tonight. We're looking backwards. We're looking at somebody controversial. And we're having a very manly Christmas. I know, a manly Christmas in the year 2020. I'm telling you, that's a broadcast from behind enemy lines unto itself, right? But Jimmy, this is a very manly P-Hall Christmas. Very controversial character, but somebody I think has been very misunderstood over the ages. What say you, my friend, before I dive back into our very manly Christmas story?
Well, I say yes, he has been misunderstood because, the thing is, you can't paint everybody with the same brush. It's just like you can't necessarily go after all of these brotherhoods and say that everybody's, all of the same mind. Like, it's not like that. There's sects within sects. There's groups within groups. You don't get to those groups unless you make it through the test. Most people fail the test.
That's the thing, Jimmy. These things go far deeper than any of us ever appreciate, right?
Right. He's written a lot of books, okay, and his information is there for everyone to have, and he did what he did for humanity. He didn't do what he did for some evil reason, for some secret brotherhoods. He did what he did because he wanted to show as much as of the occulted history of mankind and the different philosophies from different ages and different viewpoints, and show the similarities, also show the polarities. Where are we off the path as far as humanity goes, and far as civilization goes? What's missing? What was there but's not there now because there's something that's been bred out of us, that type of thing, or socially engineered out of us, necessarily. I mean, it doesn't necessarily require breeding. It only requires the behavior modification complex. So, like I said before, I think Manly P. Hall, he's a quantum computer of esoteric information. You ask him a question, and you'll find out everything you need to know in 90 minutes or less.
He's the D-wave of esoteric woo.
He is, man.
So let's get back into it, because according to Christmas, according to Manly P. Hall, he says, we have referred to the pre-Christian celebration of the winter solstice festival under the broad heading of faith. This is sustained by the attitudes of the worshippers. They regarded the cycles of the sun god as a direct evidence of divine providence. They neither questioned nor doubted, but accepted with complete gratitude the symbol of the divine presence. To them, it was enough to live in the glory of the day, to work and play according to the seasons and the rules which individual sun had established for them. Man lived upon universal bounty. All that he was, he owed to the gods who had created in their kindness, in their own likeness, and had given him domain or dominion, there's a trigger word, over the land and the sea. Every important work was accompanied by worship, for all that mortals could do was trust, or was to trust in the divine benevolence. They were not burdened by their faith, rather they rejoiced in the privilege of being grateful, and the revealing in all their labours their certainty that the gods were in the heavens and all was right in the world. In the early 20 centuries ago, the Christian faith was brought to a sad and troubled world in which too many human beings had forgotten to be grateful. Christianity began as a small faith, mostly local in its sphere of influence. For several centuries, the new faith existed precariously in a pagan atmosphere, and it was not until the conversion of the Constantine Magnus in the 4th century that the religion became safely established. Now, in the early years of the Christian communion, there were no general consensus of opinion as to the month or day of Jesus' birth. Because of this, Christmas was not among the earliest festivals of the church. It's quite possible that the first converts intentionally refrained from creating a festival to honour the birth of Christ. They had rejected the elaborate pagan ceremonies and did not wish to create a similar celebration of their own. Actually, none of the older fathers seem to have known the month and day of the Nativity, and it has been said that there is no month in the year which some respectable authority has not assigned as the birth month of Jesus. One early winter said it was generally believed that Christ was born on the 20th of May. One early writer said it was generally believed that Christ was born on the 20th of May, and another, equally devout, selected the 10th or 20th of April. Several groups were convinced that the Master was born in January, and it remained for Pope Julius, who reigned in the 4th century, to officially assign the date of December the 25th. This leads to the realization that there was a gradual trend toward bringing the birth of Christ into the harmony with the greatest celebration known in the ancient world. Now, this is quite understandable, since it was not the policy of the church at the time to actually destroy the altars of ancient gods, but to cleanse them of their older symbols and rededicate them to the Christian faith. It was always easier to accept new doctrines than to change the old ways. If these difficulties can be or reconciled, the results are usually fortunate. There were a number of philosopher mystics among the early Christians, and these gradually identified Christ with the sun. They saw in him the light of the world, the greatest light of all time, the true light that lightens every man that cometh into the world. Ideas must have symbols so that they can be expressed and more readily communicated. Perhaps the old pagans had mistakenly worshipped the sun without realizing fully the meaning of salvation. Or perhaps they did know, but expressed themselves in unfamiliar terms. If Christ was the light of the world, was he not the true sun hero, the light bearer, who was the desired of all nations? As the sun lit the sky and made the earth fruitful, so the Son of Man cast his light into the souls of humanity, making spirits fruitful for good works. Whatever the motive may have been, it was not actually the legislation of man or of the priests and bishops that established Christmas. It was an intuitional recognition of the appropriateness of the great sun symbolism. In these ways, the first Christians were influenced in their selection of the most proper and fitting day. By the 5th century AD, the date of the Christ Mass was almost universally accepted throughout many branches of the Christian faith. Other factors may also have influenced this decision. The first Christians found it expedient to assemble for the celebration of their faith on the festival days of their pagan neighbours. Only on such days could they gather inconspicuously and with slight probability of molestation. Later they were given official privilege to meet on certain days, but by degrees of emergency, measures became an accepted tradition. So it was like an executive order of the day, but it just became a thing. Just saying. There was also the fact that missionaries and evangelists traveling into distant regions found it easier to convert the peoples of these lands when they were permitted to preserve their ancient festivals. Perhaps the conversions under these conditions were not as complete as might be wished. But at that time, it was important, scroll over here, to maintain relations. Now, originally, the Christ Mass was almost completely religious within the body of Christendom. It combined several sacred occasions, including the Epiphany, a feast celebrated on January the 6th, commemorating the coming of the three Magi to the crib of Christ, or, as it is said, the first manifestation of Christ to the Gentiles. In the 4th century, the marriage feast of Cana, and the feeding of the multitudes with fishes and barley loaves were included in the Christmas festivals. Now, the broad form of Christmas as we know it seems to have originated in Western Europe, but spread rapidly eastwards, and in the middle years of the 4th century was observed in the Byzantine at the court of Constantius or Constantius. It was not the Mass in the church or the cathedral which first and most completely expressed the Christmas spirit. This true festival came directly into the lives of the concerned. It was an intimate religious experience, a sacrament in the home by the fireside, and most of all in the heart. It was dedicated to the memory of a little child who was to become the undisputed ruler of the human heart. This child, born in a stable surrounded by animals, was not temporal or not atemporal, sovereign, crowned, and sceptred, for his kingdom was not in this world. His was the rule of love, and he was the Prince of Peace. Even the poor and the illiterate could understand the life way of the gentle Nazarene. They tried to restore his spirit in themselves by doing his works and by honouring his memory through the acts of Christian charity. They celebrated Christmas in memory of him and in the way that they believed he would have wished. They remembered his teachings that if a man would love his God, he should love his brother also. It was the original intent that during the Christmas season, love should rule the world, in anticipation of the day when the Lord of love should return to his kingdom and rule over all men in spirit and in truth. The attitudes of medieval man were largely influenced by his environment. His personal opportunities were limited. His requirements were few and simple, and he was subjected to a variety of misfortunes, natural or man-made. As might be expected, scroll over here, under such conditions, he devised his own amusements and took advantage of every possible opportunity for gaiety and celebration. His manners were rude, and many of his customs would seem offensive to us. He was devoutly religious, and he turned to his faith and security because he had no concept of improving the conditions under which he lived. It is notable that medieval man had not yet awakened to the idea that he would help to build a better world for himself and others. He certainly possessed humanitarian instincts and the rudiments of social consciousness, and he revealed these instincts most strongly and clearly through his celebration of Christmas. Gradually, he came to identify this festival with emotional hope. The birth of Christ meant to him the assurance of ultimate well-being, if not in this world, then in a better place beyond the worth, or beyond death. Many worlds, anyone? He rested his hope in God, for he had faith in his fellow man, and even less in himself. Yet for him, the Heavenly Father had sent his Son into the world in the likeness of a mortal person. Through this wonderful intercession, the gates of salvation had been opened, and the lonely, the tired, the sick and the poor were not forgotten. We know that even today, sorrow and adversity incline us to seek the consolidation of the Spirit. The Middle Ages of European history were burdened with war, plague, drought, and famine. The individual could not cope with these vast problems. He could only accept them and turn to his faith for strength. Under such conditions, the natural mysticism in the human soul found its fullest expression. With this came the rise of Christian mysticism and the gradual identification of the Christ story with the changes wrought within the human soul by piety and devotion. All this led in due time to the firm belief that there was a divine power within man which was the very presence of God. The coming of Christ was reenacted in the life of each individual who chose to live according to the spirit of the Master's teachings. At Christmas, there would not only be the beautiful tradition of a child born in Bethlehem, but the timeless symbolism of eternal truth born in the heart of man. This was understandable, even in the days when men's minds were scarcely touched by a philosophical insight. We should also remember that during these long, dark centuries, men still lived, to scroll over, in a world which belonged essentially and factually to God. The individual did not feel that peculiar reverence for human achievement which has developed in the last 100 years. Today, in our emergencies, we turn to institutions fashioned by our own ingenuity. We are dazzled by our own ability and powers, and have gained a false sense of self-sufficiency. The way of heaven appears to us remote and incomprehensible. Probably it is good that we have learned to solve many of our own problems, but most of these solutions pertain only to physical comforts and securities. If medieval man was too small to meet his own needs, modern man has grown so large that he's forgotten his own basic requirements. Every day he is faced with uncertainties and troubles, but he blunders along trying to solve, with his mind, critical situations which demand a greater essential enlightenment than he actually possesses. Flicked off it. It is nice to feel that we have conquered the primordial darkness with an electric light, or overcome its isolation with the automobile, the telephone, the aeroplane. Yet none of these can actually bridge the interval between human souls. The old loneliness still lingers, and when we think beyond and through the numerous commendable achievements, we must finally come to realize that the human being is still a citizen of vast space. The heavens roll above him, the earth sustain his empire, the life of the sun is still his salvation, and he would perish if a vitality greater than his own did not make the seeds to grow and children to be born to him. He is also dependent upon the light in his own soul for health and happiness, and, whether he admits it or not, he still lives in a mystery, and he still has need for hope. To contemplate these greater truths, and to experience internally the presence of the eternal, are necessary extensions of consciousness. With all our wisdom and all our skill, if grace is not born in our hearts, we are tired and saddened creation, wandering down through the ages without vision and without purpose. Our ancestors knew this, acknowledged it with sincerity and humility. It would be a good idea if we could restore such understanding. We can enrich the old ways and fill them with greater joy and better hope, but we cannot afford to become cynical and reject convictions, which we sorely need. The spirit of Christmas descends to us largely through a group of symbols long associated with the festivities of the season. These symbols may well be termed archetypal, for they reveal a gradual growth of fundamental ideas, subjected constantly to new interpretations. A symbol must always mean what we understand it to mean. It has no substance of itself, and if analysed or dissected, loses most of its significance. Christmas would be a greater spiritual experience for the average individual if he would make himself receptive to the impact of the legacy and lore surrounding the celebration. Each of the familiar practices has its own gentle and familiar message. It not only gladdens our present festivities, but causes us to share a moment in the common aspirations of our kind. We have a better total concept of humanity if we permit ourselves to be quiet and to feel our bond with the ages. This may inspire us not only to cherish the noble ideas of the past, but to advance them and find new motives for preserving our priceless heritage and liberty. It makes no difference whether Christmas symbols originated in Eastern nations or in ancient pre-Christian times. They belong to a universal pattern of Gentile remembrances. They tell us that man has always instinctively longed to love the beautiful and to serve the good. Great and noble souls lived and laboured and died ages before the miracle of Bethlehem. There is no ancient good or modern good. There is only goodness itself moving through time. Gratitude is not historical, nor is beauty denominational. Many streams have flowed together, many quaint practices and curious rites have met and mingled. It's good to realise this, but it helps us to broaden our vision, deepen our understanding, and advance such necessary causes such as world peace and inter-religious friendship. It is really and truly wonderful if some part of our Christmas came from ancient Egypt, it is really and truly wonderful if some part of our Christmas came from ancient Egypt or India or even China. These are regions on a map, but the people who inhabit them are one creation in God under law. In their hearts and souls, their hopes and fears are like our own. The fears are ever present, but the hopes we have not yet learned to share. Jimmy Jeans, some deep woo on KBS today.
That is the evil Mason known as Manly P. Hall. Well, I mean,
not
how
sounding
can you,
very evil to me, Jimmy Jeans.
I'm saying, man. That's what I'm saying.
That's why this is a very manly Christmas. You don't get this anywhere else in alt media, folks. Stay tuned. We'll be back after the break. Don't go anywhere. Hope you're liking this out there tonight. Is something completely different on the Kev Baker Show. We're approaching the end of one year, the start of a new one. We're approaching and in the midst of the end of one age and the beginnings of a new one. And I suppose when I look back at 2020, the Kev Baker Show went into observation mode. We looked at all things from all angles. We stepped back from being in the game because we realised how much of it was a game and how much of it we were being gamed within. But 2021 like I've said to you, don't expect any respite. In fact, it's going to get wilder, it's going to get weirder, it's going to get deeper, it's going to get crazier. And to improvise, adapt, and overcome, what is my motto throughout my whole time on social media, truthing, putting shows out there, whatever you want to call it. Then 2021 heralds start something entirely new. We're going to be stepping back into the info war, but with a difference. We're going to be seeding it with things like we're talking about today. We're going to be looking back in time with information that is timeless. And the kind of thing that I think people need to hear moving forward. We're going to have new guests, new topics, new shows. Same of the old stuff that's made us so popular in the first place. But always changing, always morphing, always improvising, always overcoming. And I was reaching out to a couple of people today. And a couple of people yesterday as well. That's going to take things, I hope, to a new level. A new level in 2021 that is going to see the Kev Baker Show really cement its place as the #1 abnormal paranormal show in this world in the next Jimmy. Jimmy Jeans is here with me. How are you doing, man? Manly P Hall on the menu today, Jim. You happy?
Oh, I am. The sheer evil that is Manly P Hall. I mean, the thing about Manly, which is great, is that he brings all of the different aspects and philosophies and different religions all together. He doesn't put one over another. So everything that we have here on the earth for ourselves, is here as an offering to us. It's a cornucopia of whatever we want. It's all here. Anybody can choose whatever path they want to go down from a religious perspective. But what I found really interesting was the idea that at first the celebration of Christ's birthday and being a Christian was done in secret, and that if you tried to come out and celebrate, you'd get beat up. So you think about the celebration of Christmas then
it's
being
changed over the ages, man, right?
Yeah, and you think how it was brought back into the house, to where you were doing it with your own family to exhibit the ideas that Christ put forward, the Prince of Peace, peace, love, and understanding, and within the realms of your own house, and trying to extrapolate that out into the world,
Exactly, dude, exactly. And part of that whole Christmas experience thing, it's in the house, right? Most of you out there will have that time when it's time to get the Christmas tree out, right? Whatever you think about it, there'll be a lot of people out there talking about the Christmas tree. Some people hate them. They call it a pagan symbol. Some people,
Right.
me and Anne and the family, we love getting it out, Jimmy. We love getting it up and things, right? Because it symbolizes the time that we're in. And that's exactly where we're going to pick it up with Manly P. Hall and his book entitled The Story of Christmas. Something completely different on the Kev Baker Show. But let's see what he says about the Christmas tree. Many countries have popular legends by which they claim the distinction of having given Christmas or given the Christmas tree to the world. The pine, fir, or evergreen has long been associated with the idea of immortality because it remains green through the long winter period and is thus a fitting symbol of the inevitable victory of life over death. Springs of acacia, cypress or cypress, cedar or fir were used to decorate ancient altars, and there are references to them in the Bible. The Thorny Tamarisks, or tamarisk, was considered a sacred tree of the early Arabs, and it is supposed that from its branches was fashioned a wreath of thorns, which was set upon the forehead of Jesus. The tamarisk has a strange and wonderful vitality, and when it is cut down and trimmed and made into doorposts, it will take root and send out boughs which will arch the doorways. Here again, the tenacity of life appeared so remarkable that it caused popular veneration. The Scandinavian myth of great antiquity tells of a fir tree which sprang from the blood-drenched soil where two lovers had met a violent passing. Yes, a violent passing, he says, for algorithm's sakes. On a certain night during the Christmas season, mysterious lights like candles were seen on its branches, and neither wind nor storm could extinguish them. There is also a tradition in the 8th century. Boniface, an English missionary, went to Germany to convert remote tribes that still worshipped Wotan and the old gods of the Northlands. He seemed to have found these people celebrating the rites of the winter solstice. In the midst of a throng of worshippers stood Wotan's ancient oak tree, adorned with offerings and garlands. Supported by a group of converts, the good saint resolved to cut down the ancient oak tree with all its pagan implications. Now, it was a huge tree, and the blade of the axe seemed scarcely to gash its surface. But at that moment, a strong wind rushed through the forest. It shook the great oak, which, toppling on its foundations, fell backwards like a broken tower. The wind, however, did not disturb a little fir tree which stood behind the oak and was revealed by the falling giant. The saint then told the people that from that day on, the little green tree, a younger child of the forest, should be a symbol of holiness. There's a 13th century French legend of a wandering knight of the age of chivalry who, while travelling deep in the gloom of a heavy woodland, found there a gigantic tree, presumably an ancient pine, the branches of which were covered with burning candles. Some of the candles stood erect on the branches, and others had fallen or bent into weird, crooked shapes. On the top of the tree was the vision of a beautiful child with the halo of light around its head. There seemed to be no living person about, and the knight left the place filled with wonderment. The Pope was appealed to for an explanation, and he declared that the tree undoubtedly represented mankind. The child was the saviour, and the standing and fallen candles were good and bad human beings. Here we find the symbolism of the tree of life decorated with the deeds of mortals. The tree laden with gifts and bright trinkets was like the tree of Revelation, which bore upon its branches the 12 manner of fruit. And this fruit indeed was for the healing of nations. There is also a gentle lingering story that Martin Luther was the first to light the Christmas tree with small candles. Perhaps he only revived an earlier practice, but still it has come to be associated with his name. One Christmas Eve, when Luther was travelling alone in a snow-covered countryside, he was suddenly impressed with the thousands of glittering stars that seemed to hover over the earth. All of the world was shining with a strange and wonderful light, and the bright points in the sky mingled with the deep green shadowy trees along the road. Luther was struck with a happy thought, and, arriving home, he tried to explain his feelings to his wife and children. He went out into the garden of his house and cut a similar fir tree, which he placed in the nursery. He then put candles on its branches and lighted them. There's a popular German engraving which shows Martin Luther sitting in the midst of his family with a lighted Christmas tree on the table before him. In this symbolism, the tree certainly, scroll up, represented the earth, and the candles, the starry heavens. In the mystery of Christmas, heaven adorns the earth. They are united and share in common glory. Pyramids and cones of green paper covered with wreaths or festoons of sweetmeats are often substituted for Christmas trees in Germany. It's curious that similar pyramids decorated in the same way are carried in marriage ceremonies in India. We learn that these trees represent the world tree, or the fragrant tree of the ages, or the flowering tree of perfect gifts which grew on the slopes of Meru, the mountain of the gods. Imagine there being a mountain in there, folks, eh? These tree symbols are wishes for good fortune, long life, many children, and happiness through the years. The tree represents also universal energy upon which we all depend, and by the gift of which we are all sustained. In Japan, the evergreen or fir represents strength, honor, integrity, courage, and devotion to truth. In the art of these people, the pine is often shown keeping lonely vigil on some rocky crag. Its very lonesomeness has given it strength, and it can survive both storm and stress. The gift of the fir branch is a kindly way of saying, be of good cheer, we are with you, and our thoughts and our love shall guard and guide you. The fir is the tree of peace, for from it homes are built. It is a sign of everlasting life, for its branches are evergreen. It also points upwards to the heavens with a single green spire. This, then, is the tree of the Christ child, about which gentle spirits should gather, not in the dark wood of Wotan's grove, but in the home by the side of the family fire. It shall not be seen where these are deeds of evil, but where loving gifts are exchanged, and the rites of kindness are inspired and practiced. We note the early association of the Christmas tree and the candle at about the time of our Christian festival. The Jewish people celebrated their Feast of Lights. As lighted candles were a feature of this ritual, they are to be seen twinkling in every Jewish home in Bethlehem and Nazareth and many other parts of the world at about the same time as the Saviour's birthday. Hanukkah, the Feast of Lights or Feast of Dedication, commemorates the rededication of the temple in Jerusalem and the victories of the Maccabees, which brought religious freedom and national... Ooh, let me get over here. Hold on. Sorry, folks. Independence to the Jewish people. So, Jimmy, let me take a drink of my coffee and get rid of this little croak in my throat. But we're seeing a very different Christmas story here from across the ages from the manly Christmas story, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, it's interesting to look at all these different ideas of the same principle, which is
to tie them all together.
Yeah, and the principle is that, the time of giving and loving and paying respect to each other and, in the comfort of our homes and the next to our fires, if we don't have a fire, whatever's warm in your heart or your soul in your house, and even if it seems insignificant, it may just be the thing that keeps you going and make you feel good. I know at least, without any connotations, I love the way the house smells when there's a Christmas.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's a unique, warm, loving, homely feeling, smell, right?
Yeah, and there's something cool you can do too, man. You can buy live trees, right? And then if you have a family, each year after you're done with Christmas, you take them, go plant the tree out someplace in the forest where you know where it is. You just keep going there every year and planting your trees. Pretty soon, after, your life sort of goes by, you guys will have like this mini forest that you planted.
Wow, dude, that's pretty deep.
Yeah,
Isn't
nothing better than a tree,
Well,
to
there is
express.
something better than a tree. It's having your own forest, man. That's like leaving a living mark on the simulation, right?
Yeah, and you save the tree in the first place because you don't cut it down. You know what I mean? Then you go plant.
Deep woo from Jimmy Jean. See what we inspire here on the Kev Baker Show. It's a deeper level of thinking. Truly is. So let's have another little look at this. We're going to continue this tomorrow night, part 2, with Scott. If we don't do it with Scott on the show and Jimmy, I'll do it in a stream at some point. But this is some good woo.
I'm definitely available, so just let me know, man.
Yeah,
I'll be here.
Yeah, sounds good then, man. It says here, it is interesting to note in this connection that the German name for Christmas was Weihnacht, the night of dedication. For centuries, priests and peasants read their Bibles and other sacred writings in the long, quiet evening by the light of candle. Saint Jerome is so depicted in a beautiful old painting by Dürer. Now, the candle, therefore, became symbolic of the light of the soul, the little flame burning within man by which he understands what he reads and studies. The light of understanding dispels all darkness, overcomes all doubts, fears, and hates. For a man cannot live in darkness if there is a single burning, if there is a light burning steadily within himself. Listen to that, folks, right? Listen to that. The light of understanding dispels all darkness, overcomes all doubts, fears, and hates. For a man cannot live in darkness if there is a light burning steadily within himself. If you're listening to this right now, I would hazard a guess that you all have that very single light he's talking about burning in you. It's in everyone, but in a lot of people it's probably beyond finding at this point, near extinguished. But I think if you're listening to something different, something woo, I think you do have that burning in you. And if you do have that burning in you, then that means you shouldn't be scared about anything that lies ahead, no matter how crazy this world's getting right now. Give yourself a pat on the back. Because I do think you've got that fire. Just my thought. It says at Christmas we share the light, and it blazes in the windows in our homes to remind all strangers and passers-by that the light of our soul is strong in this time of solemn celebration. Music has long been associated with the Christmas season, but the early chants, litanies, and hymns written in Latin were hardly suitable for secular use. According to legend, the Gloria in Excelsis, the hymn supposedly sung by the angels on the occasion of Christ's nativity, was the first Christmas carol. It is believed that songs in popular languages and with simple but reverent wordings were introduced by St. Francis of Assisi, who desired to bring the Christmas mystery closer to the lives of the people. Carol singing spread slowly but surely throughout Europe. It became customary for troubadours and minstrels to contribute their services to the joy of the holiday season. Secular singing of Christmas folk songs gained special favour in England, and choral groups sang in the streets and outside in houses of friends and relations. They still do that today, by the way. Well, maybe not this year. In a subtle way, these singers like the angels of old, brought the good tidings of great joy. It is surely a pity that so gracious a custom has failed among us. There is something really lacking when we are satisfied merely to turn on a photograph or listen to the radio. We lose the pleasure of many rehearsals, the planning and preparing, and most of all, the direct action of singing together those simple melodies which, coming from the heart, convey their message to extant ears. Think of frequency and vibration when we talk about that, folks. Think of entanglement. Think of the power, that feeling, that energy that goes between people when you're having a special moment, whether it's song, whether it's dance, whether it's Christmas. Time of the year should be irrelevant, right? If we can sing and work and play together, we can live together with quicker sympathy and kindlier attitudes. Singing Christmas songs with a congenial group helps to create and sustain the mood. Oh, get back to it, Kev. Of the season. The sacred songs remind us of the solemnity of the occasion and its great meaningness as a spiritual mystery. The secular melodies contribute to the happy spirit of the occasion, inspiring good fellowship and cheer. Music is a universal language, and whether or not we understand the words, we feel the spirit behind them, and faith and hope glow a little brighter in our hearts. We have mentioned that our ancestors became boisterous at times, developed a number of more or less secular devices and amusements. Mumming was often an important feature of Christian festivities. The word mummer means a masker, and this custom seems to be traceable to the ancient Roman Saturnalia. Originally, mumming consisted of men and women exchanging their clothing and, thus disguised, going from one neighbour's house to another. By degrees, various costumes were introduced, as well as masks with fantastical expressions. This custom is related to the rights of the stranger at the Christmas season. It was assumed that during the celebration the door was open, and anyone seeking food or shelter was made welcome in the name of the Christ child. In these days, of course, strangers were few in the little villages and towns, and the ritual could not often be exercised. It was therefore permissible for neighbours and relatives to conceal their identity and play the parts of strangers. They were not supposed to be recognised, but were made welcome and invited to share in the festivities. In the very ancient pagan world, there was a belief that gods and godlings might visit the earth disguised as mortals, and it would be a serious oversight if they were not made welcome and permitted to share the common bounty. So Christmas became a time for open house, for perhaps the very spirit of Christ might enter in some familiar likeness. Jimmy Jeans. Part one of A Very Manly Christmas, Jim.
It's wild, man. And you know, it's interesting because there's also a Hindu tradition that goes where if someone knocks on your door and asks you for something, that you're obligated to give them something and help them out. And if you don't, you'll pay later on. So, hey, he wrote a paper called Atlantis, an interpretation. He also wrote another paper called Noah and His Wonderful Ark. He wrote a book called How to Understand Your Bible. He wrote a book.
Jimmy, I think we're going to dive down the manly pee hole rabbit hole in the days and weeks and early chapters of 2021. I've decided, folks, it's where we're going. We're going to step outside the box. We're going to look at things from a different perspective. We're going to look back to move forward. Until tomorrow, wherever you are, make it TFR and Denny touch that dial. So, Jimmy, with that said, you were over on the live stream there before we went live today. Have you ever heard of the Aetherius Society?
No, that was a new one on me. But, you know, I mean, have to say that was a very interesting little interlude that was going on there with the chanting.
Wasn't it? Wasn't it?
I almost found myself enchanted by the resonant frequency that was being put forward by that group there.
I think I've got a fly on my microphone. Bill Bean told me once if I get a fly on my microphone, it's like a demon. Let's hope it's not, man. I might need to start chanting at my microphone, dude.
You should yell, "Get behind me, Satan!" right now. And then
I only do that exactly. But maybe as today's excuse me, but maybe as today's show goes on, we will take another listen to the Aetherius Society. And for people who didn't see the pre-show stream, this is a UFO/extraterrestrial belief system, a religion. It's based on the channelings of Dr. George King, who, interestingly enough, if you're a listener to this show, he went around the world, and through him, the God, was it God Masters, Ascended Masters, Cosmic Masters, he was able to really tune up and dial in some cosmic woo into some of the mountains around the world. A fascinating story. We might cover it more in depth on the show, but we're going to get back into a manly Christmas, Jimmy. Manly P. Hall. We haven't actually got that much left to read. I haven't had any Jack Daniels today, so it's going to be perfect.
Well, I'm looking forward to my afternoon martini with the man right here with you, Kev. Let's sit back and relax, ladies and gentlemen, and get ready for a manly Christmas, one like we've never experienced before. I can't remember a time when this has been put forward, and I got to be honest, like I told you yesterday, I didn't even know this existed until you brought it forward.
Same here, so, Jimmy. I found it purely by mistake. Looking for kind of out there Christmas stories, that kind of search term, expanding on it, and then I'm thinking a book by Manly P. Hall, The Christmas Story, only 27 pages long. Well, we're going to dive right back into it, and if you didn't hear last night's show, I apologise, but we're on page 18 of 27. Like I say, no Jack Daniels today, so it's going to go swimmingly well, even with my terrible reading. And we're going to fire through reading this. We're going to get Jimmy's thoughts on it. We're going to take a little deeper look at Manly P. Hall. We've got the Philosophical Research Society, which I think he set up in California. I might be wrong there. And Jimmy's got some stories about some technology. We've got a whole heap of things for you today. This is going to be a brilliant 2 hours, right? I insist you have a brilliant 2 hours. So, Jimmy, settle down. There's your martini, shaken, not stirred, sir.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Smoking jacket on, Jimmy. Come on.
I had my smoking jacket and hat on previously, and I know it was a shocker when you came back from your getting your coffee to see me in my hat and robe.
Oh, yeah, I tell you, I wish the audience at home had seen you sitting there. You know, I was telling the story of George King. You look like King George.
I know, it was some funny stuff, and you know, that's the kind of stuff that happens over on Kev Baker's silent channel there over at KBS2. Coming back right out of there, I was wearing my outfit and didn't look anything like Klaus Schwab, I must say, but
nah, Klaus Schwab, he's got that whole kind of Star Wars, Battlestar Galactica thing going on. That's pretty cool. I want to go to Kaunas University just so I can dress like an Aetherian Grand Masker. He looks like he's part of the Aetherius Society, right?
He looked like he just jumped through a hoop and came from Mars.
He looked like somebody. I
got-
tell you, with his unique window of opportunity came a very small tip of the probe as well. Anyway, let's get into A Very Manly Christmas, Part 2. You can find last night's over in the archive. We're starting here on page 18. This is Manly P. Hall. I had no idea he had written a book about Christmas, but he has. It gets into Saturnalia. It gets into all the ancient rites, rituals, ceremonies. It gets into some of the more modern, common belief systems as well. Oh, it's good woo. So it says, the sacred songs remind us of the solemnity of the occasion and its great meaning as a spiritual mystery. The secular melodies contribute to happy spirit of the occasion, inspiring good fellowship and cheer. Music is a universal language, and whether or not we understand the words, we feel the spirit behind them, and the faith and hope glow a little brighter in our hearts. We have mentioned that our ancestors became boisterous at times and developed a number of more or less secular devices and amusements. Mumming was often an important feature of Christmas festivities. The word mummer means a masker, and this custom seems to be traceable to the ancient Roman Saturnalia. Originally, mumming consisted of men and women exchanging their clothing and, thus disguised, going from one neighbour's house to another. By degrees, various costumes were introduced, as well as masks with fantastic expressions. Starting to sound like Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut here, just saying. This custom is related to the rites of the stranger at the Christmas season. It was assumed that during this celebration the door was open and anyone seeking food or shelter was made welcome in the name of the Christ child. In these days, of course, strangers were few in the little villages and towns, and the ritual could not often be exercised. It was therefore permissible for neighbours and relatives to conceal their identity and play the parts of strangers. They were not supposed to be recognised, but were made welcome and invited to share in the festivities. In the very ancient pagan world, there was a belief that gods and godlings might visit the earth disguised as mortals, and it would be serious oversight if they were not made welcome and permitted to share the common bounty. So Christmas became a time of open house, for perhaps the very spirit of Christ might enter in some unfamiliar likeness. Mumming was also considered symbolic of the visit of the Magi to Bethlehem. In the year 1377, citizens of the city of London, to the number of 130, variously and elaborately disguised, paid homage to the young Prince Richard, son of the Black Prince. These mummers, dressed in royal and noble raiment and mounted on fine horses, apparently reenacted the visit of the Magi, or the Gentiles, who came to honour Christ. Some of them blackened their faces. Now, you wouldn't get away with that today. And they burnt cork to signify Asiatic or African peoples. They set 3 jewels before the young prince, consisting of a golden bowl, a cup, and a ring of the same metal. By this pageant, these Londoners fulfilled the ancient promise that before the feet of the Holy Child, all men should kneel, and all nations should give homage. Among the Christmas traditions said to have been introduced by St. Francis of Assisi is the creche or nativity scene, usually found in Latin churches. Now, the birth of Christ is represented by small figurines artistically arranged in a setting which resembles the stable at Bethlehem. There are statues or figures of the Holy Family, shepherds, angels, and often the 3 wise men. These are surrounded by statuettes of cattle and sheep, and over all hovers the Star of Bethlehem. Now, when we were just before the show, when I was talking about the Aetherius Society, they had a different take on the Star of Bethlehem. They claim it's a UFO. Just saying. So back to Manly P. Hall, it says many of these nativity scenes are beautifully contrived and help to emphasize the occurrences associated religiously with Christmas Eve. Such vivid reconstructions were especially useful in those days when men could neither read nor write, and where religion was often presented to them by miracle plays enacted on the broad squares before the cathedrals. Like music, these depictions transcend language barriers and nourish the reverence which men like to feel and to express on sacred occasions. We have already mentioned the peculiar veneration in which mistletoe was held by the British Druids. We are not surprised, therefore, to find that it has descended among the many English customs associated with the Christmas season. The mistletoe is a parasitic plant which attaches itself to trees with great tenacity and generally lives as long as the tree itself survives. In Germany, the word for mistletoe signified, quote, all heal, and the plant was held to possess mystical and magical virtues. The ancients believed that mistletoe was nourished by the air and light, and by the rays of the moon. When it was cut, it must never touch the earth, or its powers would be destroyed. There has long been a religious symbolism relating to this plant, which may have been derived from the idea that it symbolized the impermanent relationship between the body and the soul. Like the soul, the mistletoe is attached to a body, but has a separate existence in space, and it also receives into itself strange energies and forces moving in the air. The presence of mistletoe in homes of our ancient forebears was... 2 seconds, folks. Considered as a benediction. Excuse me. There we go, Jimmy. There we go. That's it. Sorted. If true lovers stood beneath its branch, it brought good fortune. Now, here is one of the most beautiful of the old Christmas customs, devoutly religious in its original meaning. It would be no exaggeration to say that to stand under the mistletoe means actually to stand under the wing of the Holy Spirit of life, or to accept the guardianship of the power of the soul. No discussion of Christmas could be complete without mentioning Santa Claus. The name is said to be an American colonial corruption of the Dutch Saint Nicholas. Historically, the man we remember as St. Nicholas was born at Capara in Lycia, and although a layman, he was made Bishop of Myra because of his exceptional piety. He is said to have died in 343 AD. In Christian art, he is usually represented in the episcopal robes, accompanied by 3 purses and 3 children. And from his earliest years, this saint particularly venerated the Christ child. And he practiced throughout his life childlike virtues of meekness and humility of spirit. Now, because he performed all his good works in the name of the infant Jesus, children were taught to regard him as their patron saint. He also gained distinction as a protector of the innocents and morality. There is a legend that good St. Nicholas gladdened the hearts of the 3 poor girls who wished to be honourably married by secretly throwing purses of money into their windows of their home so that they could have suitable dowries. This is why 3 purses have come to be his particular symbol. On many other occasions, he also provided for the distressed, but he always managed arranged his gifts so that none would know their source. If he was asked, he would say very quietly and sincerely that Christ was the true giver of all gifts. In memory of this saint's anonymous philanthropy, mothers concealed apples, nuts, and pears, sometimes clothes, shoes, and caps, in their children's rooms on St. Nicholas Eve. And when morning came, and the presents were discovered, they would follow the holy man's example and simply say that St. Nicholas had brought them. It was an early custom to hide such presents in shoes and slippers, so that the children should find them when they dressed. Average folks did not have stockings at the time, but when these became customary, there was no objection because stockings hold considerably more than shoes. Incidentally, St. Nicholas was usually pictured as a portly man with kindly expression and a very long white beard. It is possible that the familiar costume in which we represent him, originally intended for vestments, but by degrees these were modified to a more secular apparel. Now, there are other elements which have contributed to the Santa Claus legend. Among the ancient Egyptian, there was a rotund and amiable deity named Bes, B-E-S, a gnome-like figure who was also regarded the patron saint of little children. Well, this is new to me. Now, this god lived with the other deities at the North Pole and is supposed to have laboured industriously throughout the year making dolls and toys for the boys and girls who were good and obedient. He could travel invisibly through space and had a wonderful way of knowing the virtues and faults of the children he visited. St. Nicholas seems to have been first adopted officially as the patron saint of children in the Netherlands, and on St. Nicholas Eve, the little folks leave their wooden shoes filled with hay for the horse, which the good saint rides when he jumps from roof to roof, leaving toys and sweetmeats. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, ladies and gents. I'm Kev Baker. Got Jimmy Jeans here with me. Jimmy, let people know where they can follow along with you, man. Your YouTube channel, your shows, stuff like that.
Into the Microcosm with Jimmy Jean, Strike Zone. I get to go back to my normal channel after the first of the year. I'm in the Strike Zone right now. So it's Into the Microcosm with Jimmy Jean. Strike Zone is where you can find us live. And we go live every time we do a show, which is Monday at 3 Pacific on Revolution Radio Studio A, and Friday night 11 Pacific on Studio A on Revolution Radio. Thanks very much, Kev. I appreciate it, and I love being here, and I'm super stoked about Christmas with the man, too. I'm learning about things that I haven't even heard of before, which is always great with Manly P. Hall information, as you get to learn about things that you might not have heard about before, take you down another path, you know, find about new things.
Yeah, like that Bes, the Egyptian dwarf god. Give me 2 seconds, folks. I've got a hiss at this end. I'll add it in again. Here we go. There we go. All fixed. We're back. Absolutely tremendous. No lost time. About a couple of seconds. All good. And now we can get right back into a very manly Christmas. And we don't mean a toxic one. This is a really good breakdown. We're dealing with Santa Claus now, and we're getting towards the end of this. So don't worry, folks. Jimmy's somebody who knows about Manly P. Hall. We're going to take a look at his Philosophical Society, I think it's called. Let's dive straight back in. So it says here, we got to the Netherlands, Christmas Eve. As Christmas falls in winter, the snowy season in the Northern Hemisphere, St. Nicholas appears warmly clothed and accompanied by symbols dear to the hearts of our Nordic ancestors. His reindeer originated in the old rites of Odin the Balder. In the Southern Hemisphere, where Christmas falls in midsummer, and that's always confused me. As much as I love my Australians, I think that would absolutely drive me insane. It would just be weird. having had 44 laps of the sun in the northern hemisphere and used to associating Christmas with coldness, to be out there in the middle of summer having like a turkey barbie on the beach, that's just like, it's like, wow, it's mind-blowing. It's like a paradox. Scotsmen can't even handle the thought of Christmas, summer. What's that even all about? But anywho, Santa Claus is also a favourite in Australia. He arrives, as usual, in his sleigh, accompanied by artificial snow and much gaiety. Now, there is some talk these days that disillusionment about Santa Claus has a disturbing effect upon the psyche of the modern child. The little ones are supposed to lose faith in human nature when they fully discover that St. Nicholas is a spirit rather than a person. There is some question, however, as to whether such neurosis is due to a kindly and beautiful legend or results from what we so glibly call a factual attitude towards life. When we lose the child heart, the heart of simple faith and joy, we have no defence against neurosis or any of those melancholy evils which fall upon poverty of spirit. The long tradition about St. Nicholas has invested him with a kind of psychic reality. He is one part of our own natures, having a real and factual existence in the world of thought. As he was a kindly man who loved children and wished to bring them happiness, we perpetrate his story by giving gifts in his name and in his memory. He is not a god of merchants, but in a strange way he is associated with the Christmas or the Christ mystery. The Master loved the little ones and gathered them about him and told his disciples that of such as these was the kingdom of heaven. By degrees, children can come to know that Santa Claus lives in their own hearts as the splendid impulse to give and to share. When we buy expensive gifts for our friends, we gain a kind of selfish satisfaction. We like to be known for our generosity. St. Nicholas, however, preferred to remain unknown, and the philosophy of it all is very simple. Now, every day we live, the heavens and the earth bestow their benefits, but these are not proclaimed, and by degrees we take them for granted. Eternal life is the ever anonymous giver. Whatever we may do that is kindly or charitable is not of ourselves, but of the Spirit in us, which, as St. Paul said, doeth the works. Behind all giving is the one giver, worshipped of old as the sovereign Son, and today as the mystery of Christ. Like St. Nicholas, we are the servants of a spirit of giving, and it is not always wise that the left hand should know what the right hand doeth. Christmas is the day which symbolises to all Christians God's most splendid gift to mankind. We attempt in small ways to reenact this miracle, and what better way than do our works silently and secretly, as nature does, and then ascribe them to some gentle symbol of unselfishness, like old St. Nicholas. And the time-honoured custom of exchanging gifts at Christmas is also associated with the Roman Saturnalia. During this festival, the citizens of Rome exchanged presents, greeting cards, and boxes of food. They seem to have originated our idea of a Christmas box with assorted contents. Under Christian influence, a few coins were often added so that the recipient might pay for a special mass appropriate to the season. It was customary for a partisan to invite his retainers and servants to join the family for the celebration, and he remembered each one with a fitting manner. The custom spread throughout Europe and England, and the lord of the manor was host to all his tenants and their children, and there was usually a special programme of music and cheer. For nearly 15 centuries, the concept of Christmas giving and sharing was comparatively free from what we call commercialism. In older times, there were neither means nor circumstances which invited extravagance. Gifts were considered important principally because they represented the personal thoughtfulness, skill, and industry of the giver. Presents were quietly accumulated through the year. In their shops and stores, merchants took time now and then to fashion with their own hands toys and trinkets. Housewives sewed and embroidered, and, as the season approached, they were of course busy preparing foods and pastries. Even the children shared in the benevolent conspiracy and the general atmosphere of expectancy. They drew pictures and wrote poems, memorized songs, and helped to gather the decorations for the house. There was no problem of the competitive value of presents given or received. Communities were essentially poor, but this placed no restraint upon the spirit of thanksgiving and the pleasure of small remembrances. The very simplicity of the old Christmas was part of its charm and helped to keep alive the bright and sacredness of the celebration. After all, it was in honour of a man who had renounced the things of this world. For the birds of the air had their nests, and the beasts of the field had their lairs, but the Son of Man had no place to lay his head. Because of these intense spiritual overtones provided by the religious aspect of Christmas, our forefathers were mindful of the solemnity of the occasion, and there was an air of serious reverence with their rejoicing. It was good to be thoughtful and to remember that the Christian way of life required not only devotion, but an inner strength which could be victorious over adversity. Man must exercise eternal vigilance against selfishness and pride, and those false emotions which obscure the light in the human heart. The Spirit of Christ was the invisible guest in every home on Christmas Eve, for the festivities were in remembrance of the Holy Nazarene. We have come to think of Christmas as a child's holiday, and we may ask ourselves if we can restore all that this implies. Are we really so sophisticated, mature, and growing up that we forget that we are all children? We are not only children of this world, but of the greater world, and our attainments are slight indeed when compared to the, flip the page, mysteries of life which surrounds us. There is a wonderful spiritual release in discovering the childlikeness in ourselves. Do the young ones enjoy the brightly lighted Christmas trees any more than they do the doting elders? The joys of the parents and the happiness of the child? It may be that children get most of the presents, but we get most of the joy from watching their bright eyes and listening to their exclamations of surprise and wonder. And if you've got a family and you've had your young ones ripping open presents on Christmas morning, there is a special kind of feeling that comes from seeing them happy, surprised, all of that. Part of what's special about Christmas, right? It may well happen that we can injure our children on this occasion by our very desire to please them. We should never teach the young by word or example that Christmas is only a lavish season in which we cater to all their wishes. We should never substitute presents for parental thoughtfulness through the year, or use them in an effort to buy respect or admiration. A Christmas present is a symbol. We give of what we have to indicate our intention to give of what we are. We tell our loved ones that they may depend upon us for strength and integrity and protection. It is a mistake if we allow the spirit of Christmas to be exhausted on a symbolic level. Nor should we bury the spirit of Christmas under a stack of presents. We say that it is unfortunate that times have changed and that Christmas is now a heavy economic responsibility. It is in part due to a general misunderstanding and to the changes which the motions of civilizations have wrought. The average person is no longer sufficiently resourceful or skillful to make with his own hands the gifts for his loved ones. He feels that he does not have the time, but, in fact, he lacks the inclination. So today he simply goes out and buys and joins the throng which has transformed this gentle festival into a merchant's holiday. Is the merchant really to blame because we try to buy a spiritual experience which can come to us only in our hearts? We all need to appreciate Christmas as an excursion of the fantasy, a journey into the land of mystery, where everything is wonderful and beautiful, and good is always triumphant. It is a grand occasion to restate dreams and beliefs which we desperately desire to accept, and thus to rescue our minds and souls from the monotony of buying and selling, earning and paying. If we could really share in this festivity with a full measure of devotion, we would have new courage and vision with which to face the future, and there would be a greater probability that we could keep our New Year's resolutions. With smaller families, urban living, and the weakening of ties and bonds due to these continual pressures we hear so much about, some face Christmas with sadness of spirit and an attitude of nostalgia. Folks will say that they dread the modern Christmas because it only reminds them of the good old days when neighbours and relations gathered to sing carols, and the odour of good cooking was in the air. Loneliness is not easy in any season, but it's particularly difficult in the lonesome Christmas. Does it have to be this way? Why not accept the effects of changing time and realise that we are all one family, one people under God, the Eternal Father? The stranger is not different from our own, and our next door neighbour may also be lonely. We can often find the cheer we seek by giving it to others, thus establishing friendly relations that may endure for many years. You know, folks, with everything that's going on this year and everything that's going to be going on in the next couple of years, maybe this Christmas really is that time to go and knock on your neighbour's door. Form a physical connection. Things are rare nowadays, even rarer this year. And that's the kind of connections, links, bonds that will stick together like glue, whatever comes down the pike. So with all the talk against Christmas and the sober resolutions not to become involved in the frantic cycle of buying, giving and receiving, there is one thing we should always remember. The importance of Christmas depends upon ourselves. It is a festival of spirit, and if our souls are filled with the deeper meaning of the season, it will not be merely a burden. If we understand the old symbols and capture their message of hope and inspiration, no one can spoil our Christmas. And to say that our way of life has destroyed Christmas is merely an attempt to excuse our own deficiencies. One might as well say that it has destroyed Christianity, or the natural instinct to religion deep within us all. To restore the dignity and joy of this season, we must liberate the Christmas spirit from the false concepts with which it is now associated. Unfortunately, two celebrations that were once distinctly separate have been united in the modern Christmas. The first and most important of these was the sacred festival, extending from public worship to private communion. The second is the exchanging of gifts. By degrees, Christmas presents have taken the place of the Christmas presents. The Christ Mass is forgotten all too often, or at least has lost part of its vital meaning. And last page, you'll be really happy to hear, folks. If you want to restore the real Christmas, there must be something more than merely a half-hearted desire. Change is brought about by action, and even a small effort sustained by a kindly determination can accomplish much. Some people do not like traditions. They believe we have outgrown the past and must blunder along according to contemporary convictions. Yet, in the last 50 years, the policies which we least admire have become accepted as tradition, and we are bound to the new ways as rigidly as though they had ages of precedence. Let Christmas centre around things that you yourself can do that will bring happiness to others. Call the neighbours in. Perhaps the children that you know would have a wonderful time singing the old carols or helping to decorate the house. Go into the kitchen and prepare some festive dishes or a jar of cookies. By degrees, if you really try, you can bring the ever-waiting and ever-willing presence of Christmas into your life. The old memories will stir within you, and you can preserve for a new generation one of the kindliest recollections we ever have or we have ever known. Even if Christmas may not be a happy memory, it can be a happy fact, here and now. This is a good opportunity for positive spiritual thinking. We all desire to be happy, and we are all naturally grateful for the blessings we enjoy. The greatest of these blessings is love. And God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that men might have the everlasting experience of spiritual grace. Now, we said earlier that the third phase of Christmas history is related to charity. We interpret charity as supplying the needy or providing for the underprivileged. This is part of the word. But there is much more. When St. Paul referred to charity, he said, "Thus abides faith, hope, and charity, and the greatest of these is charity." The word he used is charitas, and the original meaning is love. If our Christmas spirit falters, it is because, in some ways, our love falters. Perhaps we are a little too selfish or self-centered, or we may find it difficult to overcome unhappy memories. Let us remember that Christ personifies the love of God, born into the world for the salvation of man. The Christ in us, which is indeed our hope of glory, is therefore manifested through our purest and most dedicated affections. If we can find the love which abides within us, it can become a ruler of our world and a constant source of good works, kind thoughts, and gentle deeds. When we hang the mistletoe above the door, we are saying that love has come into our house, and where true love comes, the Spirit of Christ reigns supreme. With love lighting the way, shining upon our lives like the star that crowns the Christmas tree, there can be no longer any darkness in our hearts. According to the symbolism of this sacred season, faith and gratitude, hope and joy, love and peace, which together form this grace of the Spirit, were made flesh and dwelt among us in the grotto of Bethlehem, by a mystery which we can experience but never fully explain in words. We know that the Spirit also abides in our hearts, and through us, its perfect works are made manifest. Love finds its fulfillment in the constant giving of its life and light, and our Christmas depends upon the purity and beauty of the simple affection which we bestow upon the season, and all that it means to ourselves and others. If we so understand and so appreciate, our Christmas will always be beautiful. Jimmy Jeans, a very, very manly P. Hall Christmas. Enjoy that, Jim?
I did. And it's a perfect time, for that kind of idea as well, the Prince of Peace and the rituals that have been set down in the past to sort of remind us or to reset us back to remembering, through our busy year, remembering at a certain place and time to take that moment and try to emulate some of the philosophies of Christ, some of the philosophies of some of the other important religious figures around the world that may not be Christian. Everybody's got their own little celebrations to do, and whatever that is, the alignment and atonement and the harmonious alignment, which to bring our frequency back down to grounding ourselves and being in touch with our higher power, whatever that is, and to push that out onto our fellow man and try to bestow a little bit of kindness every place that we can, especially right now. Because everywhere I'm going, I see a lot of people, everybody's, it doesn't matter what it is, man. People are on edge. It's like everybody's got a chip on their shoulder.
That Christmas spirit isn't really visible in the world the way it is right now, right?
No, it seems like, lots of people got a chip on their shoulder, People need to let out some of the aggression and frustration they may feel inside. Maybe this comes out at the guy down at the gas station because he did, he pulled in a way that you didn't like, or he blocked you out, or something. What I mean, whatever it is. People around, at least where I'm at here in Northern California, people are a little bit fed up with the current situation, and so, like I say, people can't necessarily express themselves in their family areas because, these are the people that you're stuck in the house with. You can't really express, how you may feel. So every time people go out into the world, whoever they may come in contact with, that might be an opposing viewpoint or whatever it is. It doesn't, like I said, everybody's got a chip on their shoulder, just waiting for you to just say the wrong thing, and I think, this is a time in the manly Christmas, that maybe we take a little time and start to, slow it down a little bit, maybe try to rise above it a little bit and take a look down on it and see exactly what it is we really are involved in. Because, a lot of times when you look outside your window, like I say, it's crickets, man. So the whole thing is what kind of an environment do you want to create, in your house? And this is where, we were talking yesterday about this piece where they were saying at first when they were celebrating Christmas, you had to do it on the sly. You had to, Christmas or, Christ Mass had to be done on the sly. You had to hide out. You couldn't do it. And if you tried to do it, you got beat up by everybody else. They said they molested you or whatever. They beat you up and dragged you down, threw you in a hole, throw stones at you until you're dead. Literally. So people, had to do little things. They had to put up little trees, hey, it's between me and you. Hey, man, between me and you, when you see that tree, that means Christ's birth, Christ Mass. Okay, when you see that tree, dude, Christ Mass. It was a secret.